I'm way too dizzy. I think those shots just hit me. That's when she said, get in me. A couple shots of that whiskey, a couple more when we're tipsy. My heart is beating so quickly, I think I like being risky.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to my Corrosion POWERSURGE build. This is a build I've been looking forward to for quite a while now, and I did make this build in the past. The devs did just buff it, and when I tell you this thing is a freaking powerhouse, I mean, this is definitely one of my favorite weapons right now, and let's get into it. Alright, so before we get into the weapon itself, we have to go over what is POWERSURGE at its base, okay? And a lot of this does not apply to the Corrosion itself. However, we're just going to go over what POWERSURGE does. So POWERSURGE base effect deals status damage of 50% PSI intensity once, and inflicts the POWERSURGE status. Now, Corrosion is not supposed to be able to inflict the POWERSURGE status. However, I think there is a bug in the game at the moment that does let it inflict POWERSURGE status, which we're going to go over that later on in the video. All right, and it deals shock element type damage, okay? The additional damage cannot crit, cannot strike respots, and will not decay with distance. So, with the Corrosion's case, this is the only POWERSURGE weapon that can crit, okay? There is no other POWERSURGE weapon that can crit, and the Corrosion does most of its damage from critting the actual POWERSURGE itself. Alright, so now getting the weapon itself, the Corrosion has an 80% base chance to trigger POWERSURGE with a hit, okay? That was just recently buffed, but would not inflict POWERSURGE status on deviants. I don't know why they added that deviants part. It just won't inflict POWERSURGE status at all, where it technically isn't supposed to. The deviants part, I'm not sure why they added that. It just know that it's not supposed to at all. POWERSURGE can deal crit hit and POWERSURGE crit rate plus 25%. Alright, so what this means is that when you equip this weapon, you'll have an extra POWERSURGE crit rate of plus 25%. If you click on details down here, you'll see it right there. Now, your POWERSURGE crit rate bonus is going to be different than your actual crit rate, okay? This is referring to how often your POWERSURGE will crit. Okay, this is referring to your actual bullet damage, that is weapon damage, that is not relevant to the Corrosion itself. So POWERSURGE crit rate is the thing that you want to focus on. All right, and so when POWERSURGE is triggered, POWERSURGE crit damage plus 50% for 6 seconds. The effect can stack up to 4 times. This is not true. I'm not sure if it's a bug or they just worded it wrong. However, I'm testing it right here. I'm getting 40% POWERSURGE crit damage every single time I proc it, and it is stacking up to 5 times. So you're still getting the same amount. I'm just not sure if that's bugged or just different at the moment, and you as well get a base POWERSURGE damage factor of plus 15%. Now, getting the calibration of the weapon, we are running a rapid shot double crit rate. Now, since of all the recent changes that have been made with this weapon, you would benefit more if you had crit damage. So the ideal calibration that you would want would be the fire rate double crit damage. Now, I did not have that one, so I just opted for the crit rate. If you don't have one, crit rate is fine, but you will do more with crit damage. Now, getting the weapon mod, this is where things get a little bit more complicated, okay? So technically, you would want to run a static shock, okay? Technically, static shock would give you a nice 20% POWERSURGE damage bonus, which on paper, this does do more damage. Now, however, the other option that is a better option would be Shock Rampage, okay? And the reason Shock Rampage is better is because of that plus 5% POWERSURGE trigger chance up to 4 stacks. So while Static Shock will do more damage, all right, we're going to be running Shock Rampage instead, okay? And the reason for this is because of the inflicting POWERSURGE grants plus 5% POWERSURGE trigger chance, okay? And since this weapon is already at 80%, we can technically get up to another 20% POWERSURGE trigger chance. Now with Shock Rampage, even though you are getting that plus 5% POWERSURGE trigger chance, it is not going to give you 100% POWERSURGE trigger chance, okay? I know it says an extra 20%, and the weapon has a base of 80%. However, there will still be times where you will miss 1 or 2 POWERSURGE triggers, okay? But the reason this one's better than the Static Shock mod, which will give you that 20% overall POWERSURGE damage bonus, is because this mod will allow the corrosion to keep on proccing that power surge, okay? So you're essentially getting more procs off, resulting in more overall damage. Now, if you go over to the mod conversion, we can view what kind of substats you can get, and you want this in a power surge affix, okay? Now, you are looking for that power surge damage, and here's where it gets interesting, okay? So you can get shock damage, damage against targets of power surge trigger chance, and power surge crit damage. Now, these will all benefit you really, really well, and if you get any of these with the power surge damage, it is very good. But the ones I would look for would be shock damage or power surge crit damage preferably, okay? However, there is an issue with this mod at the moment. If you do equip this on the corrosion, it will deal more damage to enemies, but the corrosion isn't supposed to be able to deal power surge status to enemies. However, at the moment, this does work. So if you do get a roll with this on it, it is still good, and it could actually potentially be better than either of these two as well. But this is what you would want, and you would want to pair this with 2 damage substats right here. All right, so now getting into accessories for this weapon, we will be running the extended break, a tactical laser sight, and we will be using shotgun AP ammo. Okay, you can use the blue tongue ammo, but the whole goal of the attachments here is just to max out this accuracy, because the stability you can control by aiming down sights, but the accuracy controls how much of your bullets spread. So the higher accuracy, the tighter your bullet spread, which with a weapon like corrosion, you want a tighter bullet spread. So I would just max out the accuracy as much as possible. And for secondary, I am running the D50 Wildfire. Now, this does work with other weapons such as Bingo and even the crossbow, which I'll get into in a second. Basically, we're just using this just to mark the enemy, but in Wildfire's case, it does give you that 25% damage bonus. Okay, while Bingo will give you that weak spot damage bonus. Now, another option that you can run would be the recurve crossbow, and the recurve crossbow, when you hit a target, will give you 15% crit rate against targets. This isn't ideal for every single situation. This is kind of like a standstill type of situation with this. However, this is my preferred weapon with the corrosion. However, it'd be more beneficial just to use something like the D50 or the Bingo for more of everything. But the recurve crossbow is an option. And the mod we're using for this is vulnerability amplifier, which is going to give us an additional 8% vulnerability on enemies, okay? And we're also getting crit damage on targets with the bullseye, 18%. So we're getting a double win here, okay? All right, for the melee, we are using the Kirky, which if you don't know what the Kirky is, I'm sure most of you do. This is the best melee weapon in the whole game. Now, defeating a target grants all weapons attack plus 30% and crit rate plus 15 seconds. Now, what the Kirky does is when defeating a target, grants all weapons attack plus 30% and crit rate plus 15% for 10 seconds. That alone is huge, and it gets even better when defeating an enemy with a heavy strike, PSI intensity plus 20%. So you're going to be getting attack, crit rate, and PSI intensity, okay? And it works on the ice cubes, okay? This is literally all you have to do for this buff. And it is so simple. Throw the ice cube out, melee it, boom, there you go. Damage buff just like that. This is incredible. All right, so getting into the gear pieces, we'll be running a 3-piece treacherous tide set, okay? This is very, very important because this will give you, with 3 pieces, 28% increase in status damage and a 28% increase in weapon damage, okay? The weapon damage isn't the biggest deal. We're mainly looking for that status damage. Now, with the 2-piece bonus as well, you will get an additional 12% status damage. So you are looking at a total of 40% status damage, okay? Usually, you would want crit. However, this weapon already has a bunch of crit damage on it. You would benefit more from having the status damage from this set, okay? We are running this with a 2-piece lone wolf set. Now, this is optional. You can, if you wanted to, you can switch this to a 2-piece shelter set for the elemental damage increase. I'm mainly using this for that magazine capacity that you get. However, that 8% elemental damage bonus from shelter would be more beneficial for this weapon. Now, in order to get the actual full 3-piece bonus, you will have to decrease your sanity by quite a bit, okay? And there are ways to do this. If you are a chef class, you can make these, or if you have chef friends, you can ask them to make them for you. These are called the large boiled waters. And in this one, I'm getting minus 500 sanity, and they're really quick. You drink it, and it's an instant drop of sanity. And some of the other ones go up to minus 1,000 sanity, okay? And these are really, really easy to make. And to make these large boiled waters to get your sanity low, you're going to go over to your stove, okay? And you have to be a chef class to do this. If you're not a chef class, you have to ask your chef friends to make it for you. but these are really, really simple to make, okay? All right, so large boiled waters. All it is purified water and polluted water, okay? Once you cook it once, you will learn the recipe for it, and all you gotta do is just keep making it over and over, and it is that simple. And this is probably the best way to drop your sanity as fast as possible. I really like these. It saves you time from not having to eat the sanity loss gummies. However, if you don't have the large boiled waters, you can always go to the sanity corrosion capsules. You can eat these. I used to all the time. They do take a little bit longer, but they work just the same way. You just have to eat a couple more. All right, and if you don't have a 3-piece treacherous tide set, or you're a new player, or you just don't like low sanity builds, you can use a 3-piece lone wolf set, okay? Now, with the lone wolf set, you will still be doing a ton of damage, okay? Because that 3-piece bonus right there, you would get 1 stack of Lone Shadow of every 2 weapon crit hits. Lone Shadow, crit damage plus 6% for 30 seconds, which can stack up to 8 times. You will be getting a lot of crit damage, okay? Do not think this set is like significantly worse than Treacherous Tides. It is not. You will still be doing really, really good damage. This is one of those cases where one of the sets is actually almost as good as Treacherous Tide sets, okay? So the only thing you won't be really benefiting from is that low HP, low sanity build, especially with like the lunar mods and stuff we're going to go over. But this is still a viable option if you're a new player, you don't like Treacherous Tides, or you just don't like the low sanity stuff. And if you're going to go the 3-piece lone wolf route, I would suggest bring a 2-piece shelter mask if you didn't want to do the 2-piece treacherous mask. And if you're going to go the lone wolf way, I would suggest wearing a 2-piece shelter set, okay? You can wear that 2-piece treacherous tie set. Once again, you don't have to. You can use the 2-piece shelter. You will still be getting an extra increase of 8% in elemental damage, so it is still very, very beneficial. All right, and so the key item for the corrosion is going to be the gas mask, okay? And the gas mask just recently got a buff as well, along with the corrosion. So average freaking power surge, crit rate plus 35%. Additionally, you as well get power surge damage plus 15% for 6 seconds. Now this part's new, this power surge damage percent, this was not here before the buff, okay? Now this crit rate also got raised up from 25% up to 35%. So this got a really, really nice buff to it. And this just ties the whole corrosion together and is so good to use, and I love it. All right, so I'll get in the mods. For the helmet, we are running Faithful Strike. And Faithful Strike cannot deal weak spot damage, crit rate plus 10%, and crit damage plus 30%. Okay, this benefits corrosion majorly because corrosion deals crit damage. That 30% extra crit damage is huge for it and benefits it so much by giving it so much more damage, okay? Now you cannot deal weak spot hit. Now it also says you cannot deal weak spot damage. You don't have to worry about that with the corrosion. And you can still hit weak spots. It just doesn't count as a weak spot. And it does say you cannot deal weak spot damage, but don't worry about that part. We are just focused on the 30% crit damage that you are getting from this one mod. All right, and we are also running this in a lunar suffix. We are getting more crit damage and more status damage. Those are going to be the 2 big things that you're going to want for both your lunar mods. Now, if you don't have lunar mods, you can just use a violent mod in place of it. What we're going for mainly is more crit damage. That is the big important thing. All right, so getting the mass mod, we are running first electrocution, okay? And for enemies who have power surge status, power surge ultimate damage plus 35%. Now, this mod was made specifically for the corrosion itself, okay? And this as well got a buff alongside the corrosion and the gas mask. So that 35% used to be 25% beforehand, okay? And you're running this in a power surge affix, which is what you want on both the mask and the weapon. You're going to want substats like power surge damage, power surge crit damage, or like on the weapon, there's shock damage, or even shock. And for the substats, you are going to want power surge damage, power surge crit damage, or like we saw on the weapon, shock damage, okay? Now the damage against enemies affected by power surge does work at the moment of making this. Now the damage against enemies affected by power surge does work at the moment of making this video. It might not work. So I would highly suggest just going for one of the other 3, but all 3 of them are very, very good. All right, so getting in the chest mod, we are running Critical Rescue. Now, Critical Rescue is just a mod I'm running because I'm running this in a lunar suffix mod. But we are mainly doing this for that crit damage and that status damage that we are getting. And crit damage plus 30% and status damage 12%. That is godly. And that is the exact exact thing you would want on both of your leader mods, okay? Because you get 30% on your chest and your helmet. That is going to be 60% extra crit damage from from two whole mods. As well as the status damage, if you get two of them, that would be 24%. So these lunar mods are no joke, but if you do not have them, you can run violent suffixes. Remember that. Again, in the pants mod, we are running Deadshot. Now we are running this one in a violent suffix. If you're in a new Visional Wheel server, they do have Downstar mods, which are better than the violent suffixes. Now, I haven't gotten a good one yet. However, you can get crit damage and status damage on them, which is ideally what you would want. So in my case, though, I do have gold crit damage, and I do have gold weapon damage, even though that doesn't matter a whole lot because the weapon deals status damage. But it's still good because the crit damage, but I would highly suggest getting a Downstar version of this because you can get the gold crit damage and the gold status damage. That would boost your damage significantly and it's totally worth it. Alright, so again, the gloves mod, we are running crit amplifier. This is going to give you additional 10% crit rate and an additional 15% crit damage, okay? This has always been the same mod runs ever since the beginning with Corrosion. Now we are running this in a violent suffix as well for that crit damage, as well as we got more weapon damage. Even though it doesn't matter as much, it is still nice, and we still got that crit damage. So basically, you see the point, we're kind of just stacking as much crit damage as possible. Alright, again, the Sheath mod, we are running Rush Hour. Now, Rush Hour is a fantastic mod. This is one of my favorite mods in the entire game. Now, Rush Hour, every 10% HP loss, grants 4% melee, weapon, and status damage. We don't really care about the melee damage, that does not affect us. Weapon damage is good still, but not really necessary. And the status damage is the big one. So you can get up to a 40% increase in status, weapon, and melee damage. However, 40%, you'd be dead. So I really wouldn't recommend dying for that 40%. So really you can get up to like a 36% amount. But this is the best mod. But this is one of the best mods that the devs have ever made. And this is a huge, huge damage increase. As well, we were running this in a violent suffix for crit damage, and we did get weapon damage again. So there is a Downstar version of this as well, which is ideally what you would want to get, because you can as well get that crit damage and status damage on it, just like the pants. So for the pants and the shoes, I would highly recommend getting Downstar mods, okay? So for the chest, helmet, lunar mods, for the boots, pants, Downstar mods. Like I said, if you don't have any of these at all violent suffixes, okay? Besides the mask and the weapon, you want as much crit damage on this as possible. Alright, so now getting into the Cradle, we're going to be running Anti-Void for that extra shotgun damage. We're running Status Enhancement, Tactical Combo, Elemental Sense, and the only one that POWERSURGE has in the Cradle, Transient Impact. So it's going to give you 25% POWERSURGE damage bonus at those 10 stacks. Alright, and the big one that I really, really like, it's just everybody use, is Tactical Leap. For every 1 second spent airborne, gain plus 20% damage against deviants. That is huge. This works in any of the servers. It doesn't have to be a gravity server. You can craft the double jump item, or you can even craft the double jump drink, and it will still work for you. Okay. This also works if you use the spring legs from the frog. All you have to do is jump up, and as you're jumping, you will start to accumulate those stacks, all right? And so you should constantly have a 20% damage against deviants pretty often, no matter where you are at. Does not matter if you're in a gravity server or if you're in a non-gravity server. This is definitely probably my favorite Cradle perk in the whole Cradle. And I definitely do like this one quite a bit. Now for your last two, usually I would do Marked Strike for the weak spot damage. However, with the Corrosion not hitting weak spots and there's really no benefit in having this, I would just do the Bounty Hunter. And I would choose my last one depending on which Nightmare Silo I was running, or if you're not running a Nightmare Silo, just if they have a certain thing on them, like Phase or Anti-Coherence, you could always put this on as your last one. If you don't want to use either of these and you want more shields, you can put on the Deviate Energy Defense for the shields. Now, I typically do use the Anti-Coherence one, but sometimes I do switch it for the Anti-Phase because I do run a lot of Nightmare Silos. But this is the Cradle that you would want to run for the maximum amount of damage with the Corrosion. Alright, so getting the food buffs, you're going to want to run Surprise Spring Roll as your food buff And what Surprise Spring Roll does is it increases your elemental damage by 5 to 15%, okay? And the effect doubles if your HP is below 40%. So this percent's random. It doesn't guarantee any of it. So you could get 5%, you could get 10 or 15%. It literally is just random. But the effect does double if you are below 40% HP. So the Surprise Spring Rolls are good for all elemental builds, and the Corrosion still is an elemental weapon. So this will increase the Corrosion's damage significantly, especially if your HP is below 40%. Now, if you are a chef class or you don't want to run Surprise Spring Roll, you could run Stargazy Pie or Mixed Fried Hot Dog. I am not the biggest fan of Mixed Fried Hot Dog. I have found more success using Stargazy Pie with in addition to Surprise Spring Roll. Or if you are not a chef class, I would just suggest using Surprise Spring Roll, okay? And for your drink buff, I would always recommend Whimsical Drink, because Whimsical Drink is by far one of the best food buffs in the entire game. Now, if you are a chef class as well, they also recently changed the way the soup works. So you can as well stack on top sparkling pumpkin soup, okay? This will also give you a power surge damage bonus as well. So this and Whimsical Drink, for if you are a chef class. If you are not a chef class, Whimsical Drink will be fine. Now, in addition, whether you are a chef class or not a chef class, it doesn't matter. And a lot of people don't know about this. There is this thing called Stardust Shellbreak. Now, you do get this in your Max Cradle. It is between level 40, 45, and 50. Now, the Stardust dish provides 2 special whim effects within 30 minutes of use. Okay, that doesn't seem like a whole lot of special stuff. However, these Stardust shell foods, one of the whims that they give you is a 30% increase in deviant damage, which is huge. It doesn't work for all deviants, like it doesn't work inside monoliths, but in terms of like silos or open world, you will have 30% increased damage. All right, and the deviation we'll be using is Mini Fester, okay? Now, there's another deviant you can use if you don't want to use Mini Fester. However, Mini Fester will give you a status damage increase up to 80%. Now, that is if it is level 5, okay? Mine is level 5. And so I will get a maximum of 80% status damage. Now, Mini Fester works a bit differently. You get 20% status damage every 1 tentacle summon, okay? And those tentacles, they changed how they work a little bit ago, but they summon 1 tentacle near an enemy every 1.5 seconds. Okay, so it is going to take a little bit for him to spawn all of those tentacles. However, when he does, you will do a massive amount of damage. And as well, if you have the Starfall one, you as well get an additional 5% status damage. Now, if you do not want to run Mini Fester or you don't have a Mini Fester, the Shadow Hound works as well. And sometimes Shadow Hound is actually even better than Mini Fester, especially for Nightmare Silos, because he can take aggro for you. So a lot of times when I go to Nightmare Silos, I will take Shadow Hound with me, regardless of which weapon I am using. Now, Shadow Hound will increase weapon damage by 43.2%. Now, that will give you a pretty good damage boost. It won't give you as much as Mini Fester. However, Shadow Hound is very, very useful in a lot of situations, especially taking aggro. And he does a lot, and Shadow Hound does an insane amount of damage to the enemies itself. I have a Lunar Shadow Hound right here, and Lunar one gives me weapon damage plus 5%. And so if you don't have a Lunar one, or if you just have a regular one, it's okay. And so Shadow Hound is the best alternative option if you don't want to run Mini Fester, or you just want a deviant that can take the aggro. But overall, I want to say the Corrosion is definitely a powerhouse of a weapon right now. And I just didn't expect the devs to buff it as much as they did. And I would highly recommend it to any player, new or returning. It is just, it's ridiculous. The range, the damage, that's just that you can't go wrong with it. You cannot go wrong with this weapon. And it's definitely one of my favorite ones at the moment, 100%. But hope you guys did enjoy, and I will see y'all in the next one.